Let's go.
Okay, let's go. Welcome back.
Yeah.
Today we're here with David Ding. He is the third guest that we have on our podcast. So David, if you'd like to introduce yourself, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I came from China, lived there. I was actually born in Michigan because my dad take his graduate school here, and then I went back to China when I was 4. Lived in Shanghai for like 12 plus years, and then 2 years ago came here to MICS to study for high school.
Yep.
Yeah, solid.
Yeah.
Me and Sean were watching this video in free period where it was an Andrew Tate short, and hang on. This actually has a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But Tate says that when he was 3 years old, his dad used to just randomly push him and he'd just fall over. But then he'd be like in life you get pushed over and you have to learn how to get back up. And when I saw that, my parents didn't do anything like that to me, but I was often reminded of like the immigrant way of parenting. So do you have any comments on that as a first generation?
Yeah, too much to say about that, I guess. I'm not sure if you guys have like similar experiences, but my parents, they're pretty strict about education, and every time I falls, like my parents will keep pushing me, keep pushing my limit. I remember when I was in elementary school, I couldn't figure out this question, and I just wanted to go to sleep, and then my dad just won't. He will like push me to figure out like how did I do wrong, what did I do wrong, until 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
That to me is like too late. It's like so late up at night, but the spirit to like finish the thing is kind of what my dad gave me when I was little.
When we had Yunjay on, he was saying that he was saying there was a study conducted in which many different ethnicities or country students, whatever, they were given a problem to solve that was impossible, and they measured how long it would take for each group of people to give up.
Ooh.
And I think the Americans gave up relatively early, and then as you progressed along, the people that lasted the longest were Asians.
Yeah, of course.
So
Asian
he was saying that intelligence, that's what intelligence is. Like, that's how intelligence develops. Those people who don't give up, that's why they're intelligent. Not because of some arbitrary number or arbitrary factor or something they're born with.
Well, don't tap on the table.
Oh, sorry. But he was saying that's what's that's what determines intelligence, the ability to not give up. And that ability that you build up. And obviously for us, we're building that ability from a young age.
Yeah, and I'd honestly say that, at least in my experience, a lot American parenting is a lot of positive affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we get a lot of positive affirmation. I think we get a lot of criticism.
Yeah,
and I think, at least in the way that society is developing, I think a lot of people are not able to take criticism anymore. I think that taking criticism is actually an important thing. And I'm kind of grateful that I was exposed to it at such a young age.
I think another negative and positive affirmation is it kind of allows you to rest on your laurels, as in you become comfortable where you are. Yeah. Or if your parents are telling you did a good job on this, or this is great, then you're like, okay, I can settle for a bit. Whereas us, like he said, we're always pushing to that next level.
Yes. Yeah. There's always like a limit you call it, but you can also like break the limit.
Yeah.
That's what we're pushing.
Because I remember, especially in middle school, if I got a 92 on a test, my dad would be like, what the hell happened to the other
8 points, yeah.
But then, for example, there was a bunch of parents' days or not a bunch, but there's some parents' days where parents came to school just to chill with their children for a bit in 5th or 4th grade. And I remember one of my white friends said, Dad, I got an 85 on this test. And his dad was like, wow, good job, and he gave him a high five.
Yeah.
And I think there's both pros and cons to that. But at least for me, I think it's shaped up to be more of a pro. Because if you look at society as it's advancing, people are just getting mad over everything.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're too emotional or sentimental.
Yeah, and anything that even remotely negatively affects them, they try to push it out instead of looking at it dead in the eyes. And then thinking about why is this so negative? Or what can I do to not feel this way? Or is there any improvements I can make? Or as you were saying, break that limit of, I guess in this case, uncomfortability.
Right. they're not taking any comfortability because they will take it as an insult.
Yeah.
And they will think that the others are probably doing something wrong to them. They will not self-reflect. They would, they could not absorb the stuff and then reflect on themselves. I think reflect is a pretty important thing to do while you get the criticism, and that's what you how you improve.
Yeah, that's true. Because I guess behind every criticism there is some truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, like this mental thing in U.S. Because in China, I'm not sure. In China, we don't talk about this mental issues because we don't. There's no mental issues in our dictionary in China.
Yeah, I'm the same in India.
And
for our parents, yeah,
for sure.
Because, but I don't know. I don't know if the U.S. was the same like 30 years ago. I don't know what contributed to this kind of emotional and.
100%. It was different. No way it was mental health as prominent as of an issue or even talked about as much as it is now back or even 30 years ago. That's a huge difference.
Yeah. What do you think contributed to this? Is it you mean too liberal or like parents?
I think it happens with development or economic development. So especially when you see a country in its decline, meaning its economy is not growing as fast as it was before. So that's when you see the negative consequences of development itself. So I think mental health is one of those things in such a, I guess it's a negative consequence of industrialism, and I'm not sure how to say this, but I guess one example would be just how much less time we spend outside itself, right? And that's because of what? Development, industrialism. So you're not getting the sunlight you need, right? And you're not out in nature as much. So obviously your mental health or state of mind is going to decline.
Yeah.
So that's like one example, but I think it's this whole mental health epidemic is a consequence of decline in development.
This is something that I saw that I'm not sure if it's related, or I mean it is related, but it's a bit of a stretch. So you have to bear with me.
Sure.
I saw on the Joe Rogan Lex Fridman podcast, or I was listening to it the other day while I was like sitting outside, and he was kind of saying there's a general argument, or somewhere near Bill Gates' Twitter, he said there was a general argument on whether cold showers or cold exposure was good or not. And then some other guy commented, like, I can't believe, or there's no way we reached a point in our society where it's being debated whether cold showers are a good thing or not. And Lex Fridman himself says, as the optimist by nature I am, I'd like to think that it's an amazing thing that we've gotten so far that where things that we have to worry about are whether cold showers are good for us or not. So I guess the same can be said, or the same thing can be applied to our situation, because we took care of a lot of things, a lot of actually serious problems. Yeah. I'm not saying mental health is not serious. Right? We took care of a lot more pressing issues like poverty. Yeah. Or poverty's not completely solved, but it's way better than it was. Yeah. And a lot of development has happened. And now we're at the point in our society, in American society, where we can look and say, like, here's something else that we should at least concern ourselves with. Yeah, that's why I link it to a decline in development. You're coming to a point where there's less to do. If a country is on its incline, right, there's things to do. The people are working, right? People are industrious. People are productive. There's always something to do, and they're not sitting there in a declining period, So that's why I link it specifically to a decline in a country's development. Yeah, and of course there's hormonal imbalances as well. This might come as a result of development. We were talking about this last episode especially. But, birth control, whenever a woman pees that's on birth control, her hormones go into the water, and our filtration systems, they don't filter it, yeah. So when that water is recycled, the water that we drink or shower in can have female hormones. And it's bad not only for us, but it's bad for women as well, because it offsets their hormonal imbalance. So then it causes us to feel anxiety, or at least if our testosterone is reduced, then for us, males, I don't know. I think women, it's mainly because menstruation affects their moods, right? Yeah. For women, and a lot of the stuff in our water and stuff in our foods
Right, have
can
that.
have an effect on
that,
menstrual cycles.
Yeah.
And then for us, our testosterone decreases, in which then we can say maybe our motivation isn't high enough, or our drive, or we feel like less of a man. And then we start to think about like anxiety or some sort of mental health problem.
Yeah, and again, that's a direct consequence of development.
Right.
Especially so when development is, or when we become so developed that we have such a large wealth gap, that's why the reason they start putting chemicals and preservatives in food, because the lower classes of society can't afford food, so they're making it cheaper with these chemicals and preservatives. One, and birth control also is another product of development. So I guess if you wanted to use an example to knock like both of these things out, you could say, like, imagine someone in an extremely poor country where it hasn't been developed. You could say even close to America. Okay, so these people, one, they're working towards something, right? Their food is on their mind, money's on their mind, shelter's on their mind. They don't have time to sulk in their own sad thoughts, right? And two is that they're also living in a more natural environment where their food they're extracting from nature. They're not buying from someone else, and there won't be as large of a wealth gap, obviously, where the country is less developed, right? The majority of the country is going to be poor, so that's just an example to show how these are the things contributing to the mental health epidemic.
Right. I think that's a pretty good point. That when a society reaches its peak, or even after the peak, people get into like the comfort zone, kind of like the comfort zone, I would say.
Yeah.
And they will start worrying things that they do not used to think about.
Yeah.
Like those mental stuff they care about. And also the stereo issue you mentioned, like the stereo, I think it's a pretty valid point. And it's affecting our society right now. And
Well, I mean, I don't know. Do you think China will ever reach that point, or is it too culturally distant?
I mean, China is still considered as a developing country.
Yeah.
But it has the second highest GDP in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say the standard of living in China is as good as in the U.S., but some of the majority cities, like Shanghai and Beijing, those two biggest cities might have like a similar, or as at least could be comparable to U.S. And but still, I don't see as much of like mental issues or being so emotional and caring about like those details in the place I used to live.
Yeah.
At least while I was living there in Shanghai.
Yeah.
People are still very focused on stuff they are on. I mean, they have a lot of stuff to work on.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not necessarily a good thing because in US it's living comfortable. You're living like comfortable, but in Shanghai it's like competitive. People are always competing.
Even if they're the same level.
Yeah,
of
even
wealth.
if.
Yeah.
And it's kind of enough off. It's not necessarily a good thing to for people being so competitive in Shanghai because they kind of lost the taste of life. Because people in Shanghai sometimes could not enjoy life because they're spending so much spending so much time on their work. Instead of being with families and having some rest with vacations. That's like one thing I learned after I came to US because I learned from my parents where they they know how to enjoy life. They know how to spend their time wisely, divided by time to spending sports in other areas, like in arts, where their passion is. But in China's education is very strict. It's kind of they're sending you a lot of information and knowledge every day, and I don't think that is very good for kids' development because we mentioned in the last episode as well. It's like the killing of creativity while people are stuck in school.
Yeah.
And I think it's U.S. is already like a light case. It's like pretty extreme in China because the Gaokao, it's like SAT in China.
Oh, you're right.
But that is the only exam that determines what kids go to from high school to college.
Yeah.
And people are working all of their efforts, like all their ass off for this test.
Yeah.
I honestly think it kills all of the creativity that's left for a kid in China.
Right.
And actually, speaking on creativity, it's not a 180, but I'd like to bring this up. This is another thing from a Joe Rogan podcast. When I was listening to Joe Rogan Naval, he was saying that a lot of work that normal people do, or a lot of work that workers do especially, or the skills that we learn in college or even in standard education, he's saying all of that in the future can be replaced by AI. Because in the example of sales, if we're thinking about it, or there's already examples of people at cash registers or whatever for being replaced by robots. But if you think, even in terms of sales, if there is a mind that's capable of processing every single sales call ever made, and it knows the best things to say, pick and choose based off the customer and their personality type or whatever, then is that not the best sales agent? It can outcompete every human. And we have something called burnout, and we have fatigue, and sometimes we're stuck in a rut where we can't have any ideas or whatever. The AI doesn't have that. The AI can work 24 hours a day if it has to.
Right.
And he's saying that in the future, creative outlets are the only
only way out for humans to survive in this
humans,
society
yeah.
or stand there even.
So, do you have any thoughts on that? Or especially with the way that our education system is going. I don't want to harp on education too much since we already have an episode on it.
Right.
But since the way our education is going and it's kind of killing off our creativity, and then once there is a time that arises for us to have like the only thing that we have is creativity, because AI can just virtually do anything else better than any human can.
Right. I felt like it would be like a social issue, and it will be probably happening in the next 50 years. This will be happening. I mean, AI could literally replace all the hard works and some intelligence, low intelligence jobs, and this will be a problem for our labor markets first of all, and people will not have jobs. Not quite sure what. So this might be where is it going? So while if humans are, let's say those hard, how much what do you think is like the percentage for those labors that could be replaced by robots?
If you're saying our parents are IT workers, I think doctors eventually, once people start trusting robots.
Not mine. Not mine.
Well, yeah, but even financial, like anything to do with finance, I think a lot of robots could replace. I think the main issue is faith, and I think once people will have faith, because if the results are showing, like if an AI investing is getting better results than human investing, then eventually at some point people will be like, okay, this is a market that I have to hop into.
Right, and then
so I think 98% of jobs can be replaced.
That's true. I mean, if we don't take any actions, I felt like humans' population will be decreasing a lot.
Yeah, I think a lot of humans live off their purpose or their work as well. I think retirement, or if you look at Japan, there is somewhat of a retirement, but their work culture there is so bad that people just work until they die, and they tend to have longer lifespans as well. A lot of people attribute it to the health in their diet, but I think it's more so the fact that they have work to do. My great-grandfather was a farmer that lived to like 96 or something, or close to 100, and he literally got up every day and just worked on his farm from when he was like 17 to when he died. So
that's a spirit, isn't it?
Yeah.
The spirit that carries people's health.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, speaking of India, I want to get back to the point where we were talking about development and mental health, and you made the point that in China, in major cities, there's people of equal wealth to Americans,
Right.
and they're still not as. The culture is still different, right?
It's not as relaxed. As,
Yeah.
The values are different.
Right. And obviously it varies, but we're making a generalization or an average. We see the difference in the culture. So I guess the comparison I want to draw is to India. So obviously, like I visit India, but we're connected with everyone we know in India. And a lot of my family now is, part of that class you're talking about where they're living in major
Right.
cities and they're, well, as you could compare their wealth to that of an American. But I would say that the culture is becoming similar to America
Oh.
in India. Not as much as you say where, it's in China, it's still very competitive and the people are still working towards something, right? I would say that to me, it seems like it's slowly becoming like America for these wealthy Indians. But I'm just wondering why. Like, what is the difference in the Chinese culture and maybe India? I mean, obviously you won't know much about India, but is there anything specific about Chinese culture?
Yeah, I'm thinking where the difference come from, or if there is an incomplete part in my perspective. Because, what age range or what's the age range for high schoolers? You're talking about in India?
Yeah.
They're becoming more in US in like what ways?
Westernized meaning, they're not working as hard. I feel like they won't be as successful as their parents.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Does India have like a thing like similar to alcohol?
Yeah. For the exams,
yeah.
And yeah, that is the only way you get into colleges. But it's not just one test for every single college.
Yeah. For example, there's a college called IIT. I think IIT, I believe, one of them has the lowest acceptance rate in the world. It's like 0.3 or 0.2%, something like that. They have their own specific tests.
Yeah.
But then there's some other colleges that accept a certain form of test.
For medical school, because everyone wants to be a doctor in India now, the government has standardized one test called the NEET.
For all the med students.
So it's not as rigid as China where you have one test for every discipline, but it's still dependent on a test. They're not looking at your high school grades or whatever. Your high school is to prepare you for that test.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. We have like similar systems. What about like parents? I think generational or like parenting is a big thing that influence how child is developing.
Right.
So,
I would say the parents, like the wealthy class of Indians I'm talking about, the parents are like more relaxed.
More relaxed.
100%.
Yeah.
I think even my parents are more relaxed.
Yeah.
For example, I can say shut up jokingly to my dad. But I know if my dad is talking about some like random thing, I'll just say it.
I don't know about that. That's like a cultural thing.
Yeah. That is a cultural thing.
I'm talking about in terms of like work or school. Like how I think that's what we were both talking about.
No, but even then, if you're saying it's getting more relaxed as from parenting, for example, I'm saying, or my dad is saying something about Messi being the best player in the world or something, and I disagree because my dad only watches the World Cup and nothing else. I'll say shut up. But then if my dad even remotely said anything like that to his dad, he would have gotten his like shit slapped out.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Okay, but in terms of school, work.
You're saying that they're prioritizing
in terms of school, work
less.
How are their parents? I'm saying the parents are less strict. Like, for example, I can think of a cousin. All right, her parents were. All right, this goes way back. All right, her grandparents. Her grandfather was probably the most successful in their family. Mm-hmm. Her dad is less successful, and I feel like she'll be even less successful.
No. So we see a trend over here.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Whereas you're saying,
yes.
Whereas what I'm inferring from what David's saying is that each generation will become more successful in China, or would that be?
Yeah. Let me think of an example. Honestly, I felt like their success is dependent on still. It's not 100% guaranteed that they will be successful, but they have that spirit. They have the working ethics. to give them like the platform or even like the opportunity to be successful. I'm not sure about what's it like in India. Do you think they have the opportunity, they just missed it, or
I think in general, if you're saying, I think in general it's not really an Indian thing. I think China is the exclusion of this, but or Chinese culture is the exclusion of this principle. But if you're looking at human society as a whole, there's a saying that hard times create
I love
men,
that. Cool.
and strong men create weak times. Weak times create weak men.
Yeah.
And then weak times create weak men.
Yeah.
Weak men create hard times.
Yeah.
That cycle keeps repeating.
Right.
But there's very rare examples in which a successful person's next because they live in comfortable. Their next generation will be as successful or more successful. I think but a culture can change that. Because if you look at Dhirubhai Ambani and then you look at Mukesh Ambani, Dhirubhai Ambani was already like a multi-billionaire, and his son is like multi-billionaire.
Yeah.
So, but I think a lot of parents, successful parents, they're nice to their children and they give them whatever they want. Maybe in some limited capacity, they still do.
But it's what you said. What we're gathering is that China seems to be an exception to this rule.
That's what I'm saying.
Why?
China is an exclusion.
So why is that? That's my question. My parents have always said, or my dad has always said that, like, I mean, he's no expert on China, but he's always said that they're more disciplined than us. Their culture enforces discipline more than us, or more than anyone in the world.
I think it's the Chinese government. It's honestly
Really?
I was going to say that too, because China has a more rigid rule on their people.
Yeah.
Like the thing that we're going to cut out earlier.
Yeah.
Like, if we said that about India, nothing would happen to us. Or not. I mean, it's not like anything's going to happen.
It's a little bit more.
Either,
it's more strict than America.
It's more strict than America, but it's not as strict as China.
Yeah.
Chinese government is insanely
It's
strict.
actually insanely strict. They would. The Chinese government. Yes, we know.
Not a lot we can say.
Yeah, not a lot we can say. Okay. Let me think of an example to explain this. So Chinese government, during the COVID, right?
Right.
Chinese government has probably like the highest efficiency in dealing with COVID, even though it's such a population.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Well, that is an advantage, but it also shows that central government has a lot of power. They could move a lot of people. They could use the military. They could do everything. They have the power to change or to control the society. And I don't think many of the countries have this power.
Yeah.
And they having this power could set a very organized society as well, which is where China is currently in. And I think education and everything and the discipline you were talking about is what Chinese government has done and has set up, has established. It's always a two-sided thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That makes sense. I guess the thing that I was thinking of, based off the first part of what you said about culture and discipline, I'd say that the Japanese are another group in East Asia that they're very disciplined.
Yes,
they wake up, they have rigid schedules, and they work a ton. They work more than any other country in the world that is, or at least one of the most. But they're actually in the middle of both the population and economic collapse.
That's true.
I think that's because of their population that their economic collapse is happening, though. Their population is getting so old, and their workforce...
Yeah, but then why are people just not having kids?
What do you mean?
Well, there is a social issue here. I think there's a social issue in Japan that's causing this. People are very isolated. They're very individualistic. They kind of don't depend on each other. I don't know, it's kind of spirit. They have this spirit that they could just be independent at all, or it could be a cultural thing.
And that's a Western thing. Like Japan is that's a very Western idea. Individualism is a Western.
It is because during World War II, and after that, U.S. and Japan has a pretty good connection
Yeah.
for like trade.
Yeah, Japan is known for
Stuff.
becoming westernized.
Right.
So
But yeah, they're becoming individualistic. And another thing is that I felt like there might be some nuclear remains in their body that has been passed on in generations
really?
that causes like cancer and
I don't
decreases
know about
like
all
that.
that.
I'm not sure. That's just a theory, but
yeah,
their culture is just being too isolated.
Yeah.
There
That's
are
true. And you think Chinese culture emphasizes more togetherness?
yeah.
yeah, for sure.
What about like family units in China? Is it mostly individual families living together, or do you have extended families living together?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Because in China, house prices are like probably one of the highest in the world.
Yeah.
So,
Really? More than
Yeah.
here?
much more.
Really?
Side-
Same with India, bro.
Yeah,
In like Chennai and
guess,
stuff.
yeah.
in the city, in the downtown, because everyone lives in downtown. No one.
There's so many people
Yeah,
per
so many
square
people.
unit of land.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
makes it
Population
so
prices are just high.
Yeah.
so much higher. There's no mansions in China.
What about wage prices as a result?
The wage prices
Or not wage prices.
Wages.
Just wages as
Wages.
the
as a
counterbalance.
result of war.
Okay, for example, the reason why I brought up America, in 1950s, 1940s, the average blue-collar worker salary, I don't know if it's blue-collar or white-collar, but the average salary for a certain group of people was $1,300, and the average house price was $3,000. But now the average salary is $40K or something.
And the house price is like 400.
Yeah.
Let me think about this.
So can people actually afford the houses?
No. To that question is definitely no in big cities.
Yeah.
People are grinding their whole life for houses in
Yeah.
China.
Yeah.
It's kind of remember what we were talking about why they're working so hard.
Yeah.
That is one of the things.
Yeah.
House is one of the biggest things for Chinese people.
Yeah.
It both represents their assets because their prices are stable. They won't lose much value, or even they could go rocket high. I'm not sure, but they will not lose value because Chinese government have control over it, and other reasons. So they want to have houses so they could have a stable life. Stable life is kind of what they also wanted, and then for the next generations. So if the kid in the next generation is not successful, they will have to live with their parents. And actually, that's most of the cases in China.
Is living with your parents seen as a bad thing?
Not as a bad thing, but not as independent. And
Are you guys trying to be more independent?
well, in China, yes, because the new generation does not really do know to live with their parents. I feel like
Really?
they have so much disagreements. It's
I think-
something. It's kind of contributed by the westernizing Shanghai and those big cities.
So would I be right to say then that individual family units are prioritized, but as well as their like dedication to the society as a whole or government? So it's not individualism like Japan, but it's individualism individualism paired with dedication to society as a whole. Like you want separate family units, but all those family units are working together as a whole. Whereas in Japan, you just have separate family units with separate individualistic desires.
I guess, but do you think a certain balance? For example, if we take India,
Sure.
my entire mom's family lives in one apartment. There's 3 floors, and my grandma lives in one, my mom's sister lives in one, my mom's other sister lives in one, and then my mom has her own apartment.
So the point I'm trying to make is that I think China's government doesn't want that. I think they want you to be more dedicated to the government or society rather than your family.
That makes sense. So you think that certain balance between, or if one end of the spectrum is Japan and the other end of the spectrum is India,
Right.
then it's somewhere towards the middle.
Yeah.
To where they don't become or the new generations don't get. Well, I can't think of any other word besides weaker.
I think no, not weaker, but I think that balance is right for a society to prosper as a whole,
Yeah.
or an economy to prosper.
But like a new generation, for example, like in India, a new generation. I guess it's not softer, but for example, with your cousin's example,
Sure.
not as successful.
Yeah.
And then if you're taking Japan, they're just not having children.
Yeah.
So then you're saying that the Chinese philosophy is a middle ground.
Isn't no ground. That's how propelling their success.
Okay.
Well, is that two opposite ends for both contributing to one side is contributing to the family and one side is contributing to the society? How does that I guess repel each other?
So I think Japan's example is an example of the West, or most Western countries, U.S., most of Europe, Canada, etc. And India's example would be not the East, but like most developing countries, as in a lot of Africa, I guess some parts of the Middle East, where we're not talking about those exceptions such as Dubai, Qatar,
like Bahrain.
Yeah. But those parts, maybe even Russia. I'm not too sure, but but sure. So that's where that group falls in. I think China might be this rare nation in the middle,
where they kind of
where you have a devotion to the government, but not sure how to say this. So we're categorizing the West as a devotion to the individual, and we're categorizing the other side
to
the devotion to the family. And in China, it's a devotion to the government and society.
I'd say it's. I mean, it is obviously the government, but I'd say the government kind of it's a proponent of pushing it towards
the extension of society. Yeah.
Right. I don't agree, honestly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then if we're going back to the parenting thing, how would you raise your children? Or how are you, like, have you thought of this?
That's a good
question.
Very,
very interesting question.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't thought about it.
I mean, just to set up some, like, context, or I guess the audience already knows, but, you're such a blend of the two cultures, because you're living here now, you were born here, but you grew up in China with Chinese parents.
Right.
So what would be your approach, I guess, from your mixed standpoint?
Well, so my experience is kind of different. I have experienced the harsh, the tough educational culture in China, but also the inspired, creative, and relaxed lifestyle in the U.S. I've experienced both, and my conclusion is you have to find somewhere in balance. You can't be too relaxed, but you also can't be too harsh.
Right.
And my way, so personally, I think how I raise the children would be a lot different than what my parents do when I was younger, at least. Because my parents kind of changes through time. When I was growing up, they realizes, or they're becoming more westernized, kind of, we're building the wells, they're kind of becoming the chill parents. And I honestly feel like children should be able to have their own world and be creative. So I'm leaning towards more of a westernized education.
Sure.
But also needs discipline. They need discipline.
Yeah.
And so that's, I guess, how I
work to find a balance between both.
Yeah, find a balance between both.
That was going to be my point, actually. I was going to say, when you have too strict of an education and you're restricting creativity, then the argument becomes that you're creating workers and not inventors like people who are going to change the world. But then when you're too relaxed, you have like people who are not going. Yeah, laziness. You have people who are not going to do anything. So when you think of people like the people who you think change the world, such as Bill Gates or Elon Musk, their level of discipline is insane. Like they're insanely disciplined, but their education also didn't restrict their creativity. Yeah. And I think that combination is what created them. And if you want to use nations as an example, right? Finland is an example of a super relaxed country. They don't have homework, they don't have tests, but like who do you know of like famous from Finland, or what has Finland produced that has changed the world? Right? But then the opposite argument is a country like India, and the argument is often, we don't have any people who are creating anything. All our people are becoming CEOs, but not founders, right?
Same as China.
Yeah.
They do not have a free market.
Yeah.
They don't even have a free market. It's half-half.
Yeah, it's mixed.
Government, they're state-controlled companies.
Yeah. And in the U.S., some people would say it is a balance, but it's only a select few people because I think even the U.S. is too relaxed.
Yeah. I was on the same Lex Friedman podcast. They were saying, can any other country beside America make the next Bill Gates or the next Elon Musk? And I think that is a thing that's worth considering, because a lot of the most successful people, the ones that use their creativity and their innovation, not in a way to just like sit around, but in a way or they actually use like their creativity to push them forward into making something that humanity as a species has never seen before.
Right.
I think that is where the Western education really shines. But that's the top 0.01% of people.
Yeah, of course.
If you see countries like China where people are becoming a lot more successful, or they're becoming a lot more successful in the future they'll become more successful than the average American. But it's all worker mentality. There's no innovation.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the point I was gonna say. China's education killed creativity, and I think that's what makes like those inventors and CEOs like people who are becoming Bill Gates, and this is why I'll mostly choose to live in the U.S. or even raise my child in the U.S. because you cannot be more relaxed. You cannot be relaxed in a very strict culture because people around you are so strict. You're living in a very kind of depressed and place that's hard to breathe, where you cannot relax because your parents have pressures on you.
Yeah.
But if you're living in a relaxed environment, you could make it more disciplined. So I think that's a case for U.S.
So it's really all about that balance.
Yeah.
I think in India in China we're making the argument is that it's too restricted because the government has such a tight control over education and society is so, as you said, there's one test that gets you into college, right? But I think in India where there's a little bit more freedom, there's more solutions that you can pursue. Right? So obviously there is this very strict, restricted creativity type of education, but there are also solutions in India now where it's not like that, but you can also enforce discipline that I think you won't find in America.
Yeah, I think that'd be a pretty good note to end off on. Do you have any final words?
Isn't India one of the combination or one of the balance between the Western world?
I think it's on its way. It's on its way. It's
when I went to visit the schools,
one
of them was like rigid Indian system. Like the teachers would just lecture and they'd ask. And even I tried to make my presentation a little bit more interactive, more Western style of teaching. And I asked them to come up to the board and draw something, and not a single student would come up. I pointed at one, I said, "Come up," and she's like, "No." And then, in another school that I went to, a lot of people, like a bunch of people volunteered, and I actually had to pick a few students, and they had no problems explaining their viewpoint or articulating their opinion.
Yes.
And I think there's, or at least it's on its way to
Right.
like that type of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that's our conclusion.
All right, so thanks for coming out.
Yep, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Ah,
Oh,
wait,
yes.
I don't know what's now.